meeting in 2024. I hope you're all kind of well rested and energized for another year of great conversations on uh, legal tech and what the future is going to bring to our legal system. And as you know, we have in this kind of group setting, we have like some of the I think most interesting conversations with people who are doing things in the trenches of legal innovation. And it's always a great kind of learning experience, I find. And this first session is no exception. We have three great presentations lined up for you all. We have Adrian Parlow, who's the founder and CEO of Point One, and which offers law firm automation tools, including timekeeping and billing, and using AI for the time tracking. Then we have James Mackey, the co-founder and CEO of LawStar, which is simplifying the blue booking of citations. And then we have Aaron Amadia, who's Senior Director of Applied Science at Relativity, which is, of course, a very known company in the e-discovery space. And he will tell us about how they're leveraging GPT-4 to help in the document review process in discovery. So three great presentations. We have an hour together, and so that leaves each presenter 20 minutes. And I would ask all the presenters to also maybe keep their remarks to like around 10 minutes, so that we have some time to discuss with the group and take some questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Adrian.
Hey everyone, I'm Adrian. Really great to be here and be talking to you all. I was at Stanford CodeX for a hackathon back in the summer and was super impressed with the energy and momentum there is around legal tech in Stanford. So very excited to be talking with you. My name is Adrian Parlow. I used to work at Fenwick & West. I was a corporate lawyer before going in-house for a couple of years and then leaving to start Point One. These are my co-founders, Keaton and Jeremy. I'll let them do a quick intro before we jump in.
Hey everyone, pleasure to meet you and a real pleasure to be talking with you today. I'm Keaton, software engineer and previously as applied tuition. Before that, Google doing legal tech, and super excited to be working on legal tech right now.
How's it going, everybody? Thank you for having us. I'm Jeremy. I was at Amazon doing search relevance and most recently at Google doing advertising machine learning. Excited to be working in this space.
Great. So on the docket today, I want to just tell you a little bit about what we're working on, and then we're going to jump into a live demo of the product so that you can see how it works. So at a high level, it is 2024, and lawyers are still tracking all of their time in 6-minute increments manually. Some use timers, some use Excel spreadsheets, but nobody's happy with it, and it's causing a lot of problems within law firms. The biggest thing that we see is a lot of lost time. I think any attorney that has ever billed time intuitively knows that they're slipping time through the cracks as they jump between tasks or things that are done away from their computer. And that's a big revenue suck for firms. Also, it's just really soul-sucking for the attorneys themselves. I mean, it's nights and weekends catching up on time entry. Then for the senior partners, it's 5, 10, 15 hours a month of reviewing pre-bills. And nobody really wants to be doing this work. Also has a significant cultural hit on firms where you have operations and administrative folks who are constantly chasing associates to get their time in. Associates are losing their bonuses because they can't get their time in quickly enough. And so this is something that's been happening for a long time. I think anybody who's worked in a law firm probably is familiar with this problem. The new thing that's really exciting is that we can actually, take a crack at solving it. Ken, you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. AI time management is a category that's existed for quite some time, but generally to get any sort of decent result is required a pretty large scale of data, or been very limited in terms of maybe just emails or just Outlook, etc. what we're working on is essentially making it good out of the box, even for very small firms.
Right. So folks who have used some of the legacy players for timekeeping, Intap as an example, but there are many others. Some of them have some sort of basic automation features where they can capture a little piece of something that happened, but none of them are actually able to intelligently understand what was going on and properly generate the timesheets. And so that's basically why this problem hasn't been solved so far. So our approach here is basically a desktop application that can automatically figure out what an attorney is working on as they go about their day, and then generate time entries for them. So the intention here is take a 30-minute a day timekeeping process down to about 2 minutes, just review the time entries at the end of the day, get time entries submitted on a daily basis, and capture more time. So make sure that none of the time that they're actually working is slipping through the cracks. Everything's being captured and billed. So unless anybody has questions now, we can just go ahead and jump into the demo and kind of show you how it works. Maybe we're supposed to save questions for the end.
Yeah, I was saving for the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds
That'd be great. Just go to the demo. You can keep the questions for the end. Just go to the demo. That's great.
Sounds good. We'll jump right in. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So what you're looking at here is the 0.1 application that we have built so far. This is a desktop application for Windows. We are actually also working on iOS to capture mobile. That's coming soon. But this is the desktop application. So anybody who's done time tracking before, this might look familiar to you. We've got a list of your client matters on the right-hand side here. We actually hook into the existing timekeeping and billing system to pull the client matters from there so that we can get a sort of a complete list. But I've just got a couple loaded in here for our purposes today. So the app basically works in one of two ways. The first option is a little bit more similar to how a lot of associates are working right now, which is select a client matter, start and stop a timer, and then our application is able to figure out what work was performed and generate the narrative describing that time entry. The second method is what we call automatic capture. And this is really the magic. I think this is where we're headed. When I flip this on, you can see that the client matters are grayed out. And the implication here is you don't actually have to select a client matter. In fact, you don't have to pay attention to the app at all. You can just start it when you sit down at your desk in the morning, stop it when you leave at the end of the day, and we'll automatically figure out what you were doing during that whole time and generate a list of time entries for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of quick tasks just to show how this would work. So I'm going to start with the first method. So I'm going to go ahead and select a client matter. So I have a client Hype AI here that's doing a Series A financing. So I'll just go ahead and do a quick workflow for that. So I've got a Series A stock purchase agreement that I've been working on for this client. I'm just going to open that up and make a couple of quick edits to show you what the document editing workflow would look like. So nothing crazy here, just making a couple of simple edits. Maybe I'll update the knowledge qualifiers and the reps and warranties. And we'll say, okay, I'm done with this particular workflow, good enough for now. And I'll come back to the timer and just stop it. Basically, what's happening is we're taking logs that we were generating while the attorney was working. In this particular case, we can hook into Microsoft Word and understand what kind of work was being performed. And we're then sort of packaging those up, sending them to the cloud encrypted, and then having AI interpret what was going on while the attorney was working. So in this particular case, we got review and revise Series A stock purchase agreement, which I think sounds about right based on what I was doing. Of course, we could always make this a little more specific if we wanted to. So to edit knowledge qualifier, but yeah, that looks fine to me. So pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and flip on automatic capture because you know what? I don't like picking client matters and having to constantly be glued to my timer application. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of different client workflows now back to back and see what the AI is able to figure out based on what I'm doing. So I'll go ahead and start this again, and then I'll just kind of make that go away. And we'll just do a couple of workflows. So another thing I've been working on recently is a terms of service analysis for another client, Templo Technologies. So I'm actually going to jump into Westlaw here and do a little bit of research. So I pulled up a case here about terms of service. And maybe I'll just spend a few seconds scrolling through this and kind of highlighting some things so that we give the system something to work with. But yeah, you might imagine any kind of legal research flow here, Lexis, Westlaw, practical law, etc. Great. And then we'll say, okay, I'm done with my research for now, and I'm actually gonna send an email to a client with kind of the results of that or the analysis that I conducted. Right. So you might imagine that I sat down and spent 10, 15 minutes typing this email out, but I'll just kind of move through this here for time-saving purposes. So I'll go ahead and send that email out. And we'll say at this point, I'm done with Templo Technologies, nothing further there. And I'm just going to move on to my next client matter. So the last thing I'm going to work on here is a board consent that I've been doing for another client here at Plasticity Holdings. Typical for sort of a startup attorney workflow, you're just kind of bouncing around from client to client very quickly. Obviously for, M&A or maybe a litigation matter, you'd be spending a lot more time on a given thing, but, both work equally fine. So again, I'll just kind of make a couple of quick edits here. And then we'll say, okay, I'm done with this document, and I'm going to actually send this one internally to another one of my colleagues. So I'll go ahead and send that one to Jeremy and ask him if he has any comments on it. Great. So that's sent out, and maybe now it's my lunch break or it's the end of my day. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the timer, and we'll see what kind of output we get. So in this case, we're basically going through the same exact process that I described earlier of packaging up those logs, cleaning them, sending them to the cloud, and then having the AI sort of interpret what was going on. But in this case, we're actually going the extra step of sort of segmenting those tasks into different client matters. So you can see here, we got a couple of time entries back. The first one, conduct legal research regarding terms of service, draft analysis of legal issues, and send to client. So we're capturing kind of both those flows here. First one was Westlaw, and then the second one was the email we sent to the client. In this case, we're actually appending the second one on with a semicolon. That's because we have block billing enabled in this environment. Most firms we talk to want to do block billing, but if they don't want to, then we can obviously separate those out into two different time entries. And then the second one, update board consent for option grants. So pretty simple examples. We can basically capture anything that's going on the desktop environment. And we're constantly pushing new integrations for different apps that different customers of ours are using. The only other thing I want to mention before we can kind of turn this off and jump into questions is how we're actually generating the narratives. So when we start out with a new firm, we will ingest a bunch of historical narratives for that firm to get a sense for the voice, how they like to have things described, because firms are very particular about what kinds of narratives are generated. A lot of them have particular rules for that. And then we are also able to customize on a client-by-client basis. So we can actually ingest outside counsel guidelines and then make sure that the narratives comply with those guidelines. which tends to also cut down on the pre-bill review that the partners later have to do. So I guess in the nature of saving time here, I'll jump out of that, and yeah, happy to jump into questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. I think the utility of this is immediately kind of jumping out. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how it works technically to do that. And first and secondly, it is not really a step, or maybe it is, but you tell me, but it's not really helping firms get more towards kind of value-based billing, right? It's great for helping capture your time, but firms are more and more expected to, not bill for the time, but for the actual value they're creating. And how do you think about that?
Really, really great questions. Maybe we can start with how it works, and then I'll talk about the second one.
Yeah, Jeremy, under the hood, kind of what's going on.
The first thing is data collection. So on your computer, we're looking at, we have a Chrome extension to basically identify queries you'll make in Chrome, emails, calendar invites, Word edits, really any file edits. So it all starts with data collection. We encrypt that locally and then send that encrypted to AWS. And you can kind of explain where that goes.
Yeah, and then basically once we're processing the data, we take a pass to make sure we're getting rid of anything that's either noisy or just not billable. Attorneys are people too. They will do other things that are not client related. So we want to filter that out. And then we take a series of passes with basically large language models to figure out the client, figure out the model, understand exactly what's going on, and then kind of various techniques in order to get the exact structure of the narrative that's returned.
So, and security is the number one priority. So we're not doing any training on the lawyer's data.
Exactly.
And the data is kept just to the attorney themselves. So retention policies are also customizable. So it's all very kind of customizable and secure.
And then on the roadmap here towards value-based, we were kind of thinking about that as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So to your second point, one of the really cool things about what we're doing is that we don't just have the time entries, but we actually have a more granular and nuanced understanding of what's going on beneath the time entries. And that data can be used for a lot of other things that we can kind of help firms with. And so to your point, one thing that we're thinking about here is how can we better price fixed fee work? If we have a really granular and nuanced understanding of all the tasks that comprise that Series A financing or that litigation, it's much easier for us to then say, okay, for a new Series A financing, given XYZ conditions, how much do we think that's going to take in terms of time, in terms of pricing for the client? And so we can kind of give that to firms as sort of an intelligence tool that they can use to make more informed decisions around alternative billing arrangements. Because we talk to a lot of firms, and the biggest thing that we hear for alternative billing is that they would like to do more of it, but they just don't really know how to price it.
Yeah.
Effectively.
I have a feeling that that's probably the sort of perhaps eventually might be the more important use case than the idea of creating like a timesheet that will be, with some minor edits be sent to the client, right? But it may be too soon to tell, but is this already deployed or is this still kind of before deployment?
It is deployed, yeah. So we're in private beta right now. We're working with some firms as our early customers, and we are onboarding more customers as well.
Great. So let me see. I'm just gonna go. Like, a bunch of people had some questions in the chat.
There's some great questions in the chat, and happy to kind of go.
And we probably don't have time to go through all of them, but let's maybe go. So Alex is saying this is really cool. I imagine all the logging data can also give insight on any repetitive tasks that can be streamlined. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, business intelligence, we find that law firms don't necessarily have a great understanding of what their people are doing. And, maybe that leads to other challenges around automation. And so we have a whole bunch of ideas of how this data can be used in really good ways, useful ways for law firms. But yeah, really right now we're focused on working with our early customers and figuring out what's most important to them and then kind of delivering those insights.
Yeah. Carl's asking, does the tool help determine the proper leaders code to apply to a task?
Yeah, so in the current version, no, but we can add that, especially as kind of introduce customers with that requirement. It's very simple for us, and
It's something that we're
definitely
thinking about
in the
recently.
very
Yeah.
short term roadmap.
Michael's asking, how do you train the model if not using the attorney's data? But you are using the attorney's data.
Yeah, so it's a lot of retrieval augmented generation, no updates of the parameters. Basically, what we aim to do here is combine this corpus of historical narratives with the outside counsel guidelines, along with our understanding of various settings that the firm might have, in order to do a pretty good job few shot. And so this is also why we are able to do it with smaller firms, because we don't need this large corpus of data. We take advantage of kind of just the power of LLMs.
Yeah, to solidify
Okay.
that, maybe it's just kind of like these LLMs that you've seen in the past pre-trained on kind of the corpus of the internet. That's where the training generally comes from.
So we don't need to train on attorney data specifically, and we don't have any plans to for privacy and data security reasons.
I got, okay. So there's a couple of more questions, and it would be great if you could perhaps try to answer them in the chat. We just have to move on to our next presenters because I want to give everyone about the same amount of time to speak. But this is awesome. I really appreciate you sharing and you presenting to our group here, and hopefully there will be some follow-on conversations. And please also share your contact information so that folks who may have questions that they have not asked yet, they could reach out to you directly. But
I'll post my email in the chat where folks can reach out, and then we'll try to go through and answer them to the extent we can while other ones go on.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, really appreciate you joining us and meeting the rest of the founding team. And yeah, thank you again. And we'll turn it over to James next.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you again. Take care. James, here you are. Okay, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Cool. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be presenting here. My name is James. I started a company called LawStar, and it's to help law students save time blue booking. So during this presentation, I'll talk to you a little bit about myself, my journey to this point so far. I'll give you a little demo and then talk about the future and how you might be able to help. So first of all, a little bit about me. It seems like a lot of the people here primarily come from a law background, but I'm sure there's some from primarily a software background. That more describes me. Right out of college, I was the first engineering hire at a startup that's now doing a couple $1 million in revenue, so doing fairly well. And then I left there to go to a later stage pre-IPO company called Attentive that does marketing. I was an engineering manager there. And then while I was at Attentive, I had a bunch of friends that were in law school that complained to me about the Blue Book ad nauseum. And so I figured it'd be a sort of interesting problem to try to tackle myself and make it easier for them and other law schools around. Cool. So a little bit about the problem. I'm sure most of you are familiar, but if you're not, the Blue Book is a 500-page rule set for how citations should be generated for the law. And that's by practitioners and also in academic settings. Practitioners, it doesn't actually matter that much. Mostly, they're just citing cases, and judges don't really care that much about proper citation format. But for students, it really is critical, and especially for students in journals. Basically, the journals are these prestigious organizations that publish all sorts of articles in academic law. And it's generally the job of second-year law students in those journals to go through and validate or create the citations for the professors that are writing the articles. And oftentimes they'll spend 10 hours a week doing those citations. So before sort of taking the leap, I talked to a few dozen students. Seemed like half of them would pay about at least $10 a month. And with 110,000 law students in the US, I figured even if I was able to get 1% of students to start using LawStar at that price point, then I'd have like a $100,000 a year in revenue and can have my niche and can sort of grow from there. So I started working on this in June. Basically, it took me about a month to digest all 500 pages of the Blue Book and figure out what features I should go ahead and build, and then a couple more months to go ahead and build it. And by the beginning of October, I felt like I was ready to sort of put in front of the people that had given me initial feedback. And so I launched, but basically nobody was using the product at all. It like I had my friends basically gave me feedback that the product at that point was all manual entry. So I thought that doing the formatting for them and looking up all the table of abbreviations in the back of the Blue Book would be enough. But they didn't want to have to write in all of the title of the author, the URLs, all that stuff. So I focused on making LawStar more of an automation-friendly product. So I built a Chrome extension that basically will add buttons onto many of the sites where people are doing their legal research, be that Westlaw, Lexis, Bloomberg Law, Hein Online, JSTOR, and many others. And then I also added this feature for internet automation, where you basically just put your URL in, and I can go parse out all the bits of information that need to be added. Second thing was that I figured in order to get some of the feedback, I would just make it free, get people using it, and that way I can improve the product and sort of see where it went from there. So I'll show you a little bit about the product. Here's a random New York Times article. I'm going to demo the URL automation first. Put that URL in, click site, and LawStar is in the background going and fetching all the information from that page, putting it on the website for you, and then it formats it in the bottom here. Click copy, it'll be ready to basically paste right into your document. You can turn it into practitioner format and go italics or underline from here, so you can change your preferences as you see fit. Here's an example from Bloomberg. In Bloomberg, I do the Bloomberg Law articles as well as the court opinions. So you'll see this kind of looks like a citation, but it's not actually supposed to be their citation. They don't make the citations visibly obvious. So to get it, you need to highlight some piece of text, click copy with citation. And then once you do that, it's wrong. So this third department shouldn't be there. Matter of should be abbreviated to in re and italicized. So let's click site with LawStar, and I'm able to basically parse all that information out, and that turns into in re, and it works properly. Similar story with Lexis. For secondary sources, they don't even really try to get the citation right. There's no year here, there's no authors here, and all of this is all caps. But when you click Cite with LawStar, I'm able to basically parse out the information that you need. And then, yeah, just obviously JSTOR is not going to offer citations because they're not primarily focused on the Blue Book. So I built that functionality for this as well. All right, back to the presentation. So my primary method of distribution has been pretty like feet on the ground, just guerrilla marketing. I've been going around to law schools. In October, before I launched some of these automation features, I went to 2 law schools in a week and got, I think, 3 signups the following week from talking to students and putting up all the posters and whatnot. After launching the internet citations and the Chrome extension improvements, I went to 2 more law schools, and I think I had 50 signups in the next 2 days from those law schools. So that seemed to basically fit the niche that people wanted. And yeah, since then I've been growing. I have a couple hundred users, still tens more signing up pretty much every day. So things are going well. And look into the future. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting about what I've built is it'd be pretty easy for any legal tech provider to just add a snippet of the code that I created to forward to LawStar. And they would basically get citations for free on their site without needing to invest much more into cleaning up their data and making it accessible for people. So I'm looking to partner with some legal tech providers like the Westlaw's, Lexus's, and Bloomberg Laws of the world. And then, like I said, I turned off making charging for LostStar to sort of get user feedback. I think in the next month or two, I'll be at the point where the product is good enough and I'm ready to start charging users to use LostStar. So that's sort of in the future. And then if you all are interested in helping out, there's my email right there. I'm interested in any feedback that you have, but specifically any of the stuff that I have below. Product strategy feedback. I'll be at Legal Week in New York next Tuesday if you want to come say hi. And then there's a few intros that I'm looking for, specifically people at Westlaw, leaders at Bloomberg Law. And if there's any student groups that you're affiliated with or have close ties with that you want to send LostStar their way, I'm always looking for more users. So yeah, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. That's also great. I mean, how painful the blue booking process is, and it's actually surprising that there hasn't been some attempt at a technical solution sooner, and also surprising that the big information companies are not making any effort to try to provide citations too.
Yeah.
So I think it's seems like such a useful tool. So some questions are coming in. So Kyle's saying that you should not limit your market to just law students. As a litigator and former federal law clerk, I can attest that judges, or at least their clerks, do indeed care about blue booking. Practicing attorneys can't keep up with the blue book changes and get rusty with the small nuances. So this could be valuable to post-law school folks. And so, yeah, that's actually more of a comment than a question.
That's super useful feedback. And yeah, Kyle, maybe I'll follow up with you after this.
And Jonathan is asking, does LawStar have to license actually from the folks that run the Blue Book, which is the Harvard Law Review Association and the Columbia Law Review and the UPenn Law Review and the Yale Journal?
Yeah, so I'm not licensing from the folks that run the Blue Book right now. There's a few other sites out there that do similar things just without the focus on automation. And I believe that they're not licensing. I think there's fair use for recipes. And the Blue Book is generally seen as like a recipe for how to create the citation. So as long as I'm not citing directly to their trademarkable assets or using specific quotes from the Blue Book, then I think I'm in the green there.
Okay. And then it's just Aaron saying, yeah, it's really impressive. So we could probably, in this group, there may even be some people from the big information companies. If not, we should be happy to make some connections there. And what are your sort of kind of long-term aspirations? It seems like a really kind of neat and useful tool. And maybe this is like, you put it out in the world and it's a nice kind of stream of income. But what sort of, are you sort of trying to use this as like what the Amazon bookstore was for Jeff Bezos and then it became everything else? Or is this just, kind of a side project and you're actually looking to do other things,
I'm still trying to figure that out. I think I've been, honestly, staring at the Blue Book every day is not the most interesting thing in the world, but I think some of the technical challenges that I'm tackling are very interesting. And it's really fun to get users and see them like having a lot of success with the product and coming back and finding different ways to make their life easier. So I think I'm going to take it day by day. And if there's other opportunities that open up adjacent to this, then I'm willing to explore those. And if there's there's another path forward for LawStar that doesn't include me continuing to build, then that could be another possible outcome.
Yeah, and so okay, thank you. And you said like something from like July to September was like code. Can you talk a little bit more about what that entailed? You're sort of trying to understand every page of the Blue Book, but then what techniques are you using to capture the rules? I mean, is this like kind of good old-fashioned AI, or are you also leveraging large language models in some way? How do you make?
I sometimes think that I should advertise this as like AI enabled and that there's a bunch of magic going on under the hood, but it's just good old fashioned software with no AI.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basically rules based. And then a lot of the parsing from the internet sites are like very rules based. And it's actually one of the crazy things. I was looking at easybib.com, which probably many of you remember from grade school, high school, doing your MLA citations and whatnot. And actually, Lawstar is better at getting a bunch of the bits of information off of internet sites than easybib is, which is kind of surprising to me. I think there is the possibility of using AI to continue to improve some of those, like if I'm not able to clearly find the page of the or the name of the page, then use AI to help there. But honestly, some good heuristics have been able to get me most of the way there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like, there may be some areas where you have a similar, kind of very strict kind of, rules and some group that has to kind of very, kind of, how do you say, kind of very concretely kind of comply with those specific
Yeah.
parameters, right? I don't know, it might be other compliance processes or something like that, where whatever you've done now is sort of also applicable in this other context. I mean, I can't come up with it now. Maybe someone in the group has some ideas for where this could also be useful, but it in itself is already seems like a very useful kind of technology.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think
yeah.
um,
Go ahead.
I think part of the reason why this doesn't really exist right now in the world is that it's not really like citations themselves are not really a venture backable business. I sort of looked at the math a little bit at the front, and if you're sort of constraining it to law students, then like the max revenue that you could probably churn out of this thing would be $10 million a year, which like if angel investors are looking for $1 billion+ outcomes, then or $10 billion+ outcomes, then it's not really something that is going to get them excited, which is why I've decided to bootstrap it for now. And I think why a lot of people have decided not to sort of tackle this problem. But yeah, could open up adjacencies, which could be interesting.
Okay, cool. And Aditya is saying he tried to use GPT-4 for citations, and he got, uh, anyways, he got some stuff that doesn't look like it's really in a citation format, or is it? I'm not sure, but anyway, so well, good. So if there are no other questions, then yeah, thank you, James. So we appreciate you sharing with this group. Hopefully, there's some law students who decide to use it, and we'll try to make some connections at our friends at TR and Lexis, and yeah, it seems very useful, and I may be using it sometime in the near future. And good. So thank you again. James, and if you could put your contact info into the chat, that would be great, so folks can reach out with further questions. Cool, thank you very much. And so we'll turn it over to Aaron next of Relativity.
Hey folks, thanks. Really honored and delighted to be here. So thank you so much for the invitation. This is not going to be a product demo or sort of product talk. This is really going to be a technical and academic talk. I will try to get to the statistical results in a bit, but I'm going to walk through just kind of a little bit of approach and background and context to get everything started. So that's me, Aaron Amadea. I'm the Senior Director for Applied Science over here at Relativity. I lead a team of about a dozen applied scientists. We build projects up and down, left and right across the EDRM lifecycle, and happy to talk a little bit more about that if you're interested or looking to see kind of a little more about what we do or what we're working on. So we'll start with a brief history, electronics discovery and AI, just to get everybody oriented. we'll jump into an experimental approach that we had tried last year in 2023, and then I'm going to just share a little bit of results for all of you, and then hopefully we'll get plenty of time for Q&A. So let's go with the story so far. For those of you who are not paying too much attention in the last couple of years, we certainly have had quite the revolution in the last couple of years, or it feels like a revolution. But for the lawyers, this feels just like I hope, a very natural evolution of just how e-discovery works. I'm going to start with kind of and anchor things in electronically stored information and how the federal rules of civil procedure have been updated. By the way, I am also not a lawyer or come from a legal background, so please forgive me if I get anything wrong, and happy to be corrected if I've got anything wrong here in the timeline. But basically, the first time the federal rules of civil procedure mentioned data was back in 1970. And the first time that we really saw a great deal of attention to data and electronic data was in 2001 with the Enron scandal. I'm not going to mention the rest of these, except just to point out that in 2012, the legal system adopted what I would consider AI in a real serious way, which was Judge Peck's endorsement of the technology-assisted review, which we'll talk a little bit more in a bit, in Rio Tinto, and sort of described it as black letter law. Those of you who have come from the legal side and want a little bit more of introduction to the computer side, computers were invented or first started showing up in 1945. We had our first artificial intelligence workshop in 1956. AI goes through these hype and crush cycles where people get promised translation and voice transcription and all of these great things, and then they fail to get delivered. So we've been through two of those already, the 1974 AI winter and the 1987 AI winter, where all the sort of government and DARPA funding dried up and all the AI professors had to go get jobs doing something else. And then two kind of key technologies showed up in the late 80s, early 90s, LSI and the support vector machine, which are used regularly in e-discovery. They're sort of core part and parcel technologies. And then in the last couple of years, we've just had this absolute blaze of models. OpenAI just announced a new update to GPT-4 Turbo today, and a further drop in their embedding models. If you pay attention to OpenAI's pricing of embedding models, I believe that they've dropped pricing of embeddings models by a factor of 100 since 2021. I'm not 100% sure, but they dropped prices, I think, again, by a factor of 5. And they'd already done it by a factor of 10 and a factor of 2. So I think we're at a factor of 100 in just a couple of years. So it's really fun, exciting time to be in the industry. And whether you're a technologist, whether you're a lawyer, I've just been having so much fun over here, and especially in the last year. This is the electronic discovery reference model. It was referenced on the timeline. What this is a template which is commonly followed for moving electronic potential evidence through sort of the initial identification and hold and collect processes down into processing, review, and production. So something that might be relevant to some legal matter. How does it get all the way from point A, where it starts maybe on somebody's phone or an inbox, to Exhibit A or Exhibit J in a trial? We're kind of in that very center of that box in the relativity sort of as a platform is all across this entire life cycle. But what we're talking about right now is actually happening in that review box right in the center, which is basically saying, hey, given a complaint or given an agreed upon set of issues and a request for production, is this document that I am looking at right now, whether it's an email, a Slack message, or a Word document, is this relevant or responsive to the issues that have been described? Now, historically, the way that we've done this is a tool called technology-assisted review. And it goes by a couple of different names, but technology-assisted review. And if you're sort of a geek on the text side, you'll know that technology-assisted review or support vector machines typically use what are called bag of words models. So they just count how many times all the different words show up in the document. And those counts are then used to create this support vector, or these support vectors in this dividing hyperplane that divides up your documents from responsive to non-responsive. And the key thing that is true here and for most technologies that precede this year is that you need to label a lot of documents before you have a model that determines whether the documents are responsive or non-responsive. So what if, this is just a quick sort of just a screenshot just to help you understand like how this looks. Like you'll get a scoring distribution and you'll have a histogram, and that's what you're looking at in the bottom right, just showing the different documents that are identified as responsive and non-responsive. And then you'll be tracking things like your reviewer progress and how many documents you've coded so far and how many are relevant. Generative AI is about to disrupt and change this industry quite a bit. I'm going to go super fast through these slides. I apologize. Mathematically, generative AI models and discriminant models are defined based on whether you're trying to map to a probability distribution or whether you're trying to identify something given the likelihood of something given previous examples of it. It's easier to just describe them in plain text. Generative models create just new stuff from whole cloth almost, or just small descriptions, and discriminative models are effectively classifiers. Historically, I'm going to skip this slide. Historically, we divided discriminative models to these trees on the left, sort of the BERT style decoder-only or encoder-only classifiers, and the models on the right, which is basically where all the newest development has been in the last few years. The models on the right are what are called decoder-only, and it wasn't thought that they could do classification, right? You couldn't put in a piece of document and say, hey, is this responsive or not? It didn't seem to be within their capabilities. It wasn't what they really were built for. Yet, we thought we'd give it a try, given all the early successes with GPT-4 and the bar exam. So here's some things that people thought that they might be able to do. We started with assisted review, and you see that a lot of products in the market that are doing other aspects or angles of this. As a quick refresher, recall is how many documents that you were supposed to find that you found. Precision is every time you said a document was responsive, how many times were you right? And richness is the percentage of responsive documents in the population. Precision and richness are actually tied together. As richness goes up or down, your precision goes up or down because you have to worry less about your false positives. Recall is the most important of these. Typically in TAR, recall is negotiated between the two parties, and 80% is considered decent. But sometimes you'll see as low as 70% negotiated, and sometimes you'll see higher, but 80% is kind of the de facto standard right now. Precision, the higher this is, the fewer documents you have to look through in a second pass after you've kind of found all your sort of initial responsive set. So you want that as high as possible, but it's not as important, for example, as recall. So these are the results. The table on the right is from a real matter where we sampled about 3,500 documents. And we compared against the one L here is first pass review. And that is contract reviewers who are paid by the hour to go through these documents and review, and sort of they'll do maybe 50 or 60 documents an hour. They identified the documents as key, responsive, non-responsive, or they didn't label it, and so we just kind of mostly ignored that section of documents. You'll see then we had GPT-4 given effectively the same review protocol, try to decide whether these documents are responsive or not. For the most part, if a reviewer thought that a document was responsive or key, GPT-4 agreed, right? So you see the first two big row sections, you're seeing that there's a large amount of agreement between GPT-4 on key and responsive. And then where things got interesting was that where the first pass or the contract reviewer said these documents were non-responsive, we actually saw a fair amount of disagreement. And then what we did is we took those disagreements, we took all of these and we sampled from all of that first sample, and we sent some of these to what's called 2L, or effectively our gold standard labels, which are sort of seasoned, highly paid attorneys who are very, very directly connected to the matter. And they're going to take more time, they're going to go slowly. And so we only used 500 of those labels as opposed to the initial sort of 3,500 or 5,000 labels that we started with. And what you'll see is these numbers that are sort of summarizing, we did all the math for you on the left. The first pass attorneys or the contract attorneys had very high precision, but their recall was actually not great. Conversely, the same sort of review instructions given to GPT-4 ended with recall of 97%. So the model missed almost nothing. Precision was good, not great, but given the prevalence in this matter was, I think, around 30%. This was effectively a call factor of about 2, which meant that had error for review or GPT-4 been used in this scenario, it could have removed about half of the review population before you then passed on, for example, to your high precision first pass reviewers, potentially with additional help to sort of help them avoid missing documents or something along those lines. I think this is a good time to pause for Q&A. I'm in about 10 minutes, I think. So I'll hold here. I'll stop my share for a moment and take some questions.
Cool. Well, thank you, Aaron. This is very interesting, and this was quite quick, you know, how you went through it. And so it sounds to me that the conclusion is that everything, like you said before, has to move to large language models in the e-discovery space, or is that an oversimplification?
I think ultimately that the conclusion that we're drawing out of this is that it's safe and defensible to use these models in this situation. If recall is your primary thing, that there are going to be situations you still need to validate that you are achieving the recall that you are intending to achieve, and we always recommend and sort of suggest that, but that you can achieve results that are sort of outperforming what many people would consider a standard approach, which is contract review.
Which is contract review?
Sorry, human review.
Human review. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I said contract review. Contracted reviewers, not review of contracts.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, great. So let's see. There's some. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. By the way, and Katie's saying this is very interesting. They're getting similar results in contract review. Speaking of contract review, and Alex is asking, have you done any testing on how well GenAI can create structure from a bunch of documents, i.e., understand timelines, repetition, multiple chains of an email, etc.?
Yeah, we have a separate line of inquiry into how you would take, as you would say, like 100 or 500 documents, and then pull out a timeline, identify key facts in the matter. So moving a little bit away from the discovery side of your matter and moving more into the merit side, where you're starting to try and build up your case and build your strategy. I can't talk about it before next week, but if you're at Legal Week, stop by the Productivity booth, and I'll be happy to share a few more details.
Yeah, I think, okay, that's interesting. And some of the folks here might go to Legal Week. I think that, you know, we ran 2 LLM and law hackathons this past year, and the winner of the second one was an e-discovery project, and I think it's also going a little bit in that direction. It's like helping, you know, just organize and understand the context, and, you know, just bringing structure into the mess of, you know, all the documents. And that seems, you know, this seems like a good use case for large language models too. Hold on.
Yeah, I can handle this next question. Have you found any success with finding relevance in structured data like spreadsheets? Yeah, more than I expected. Is probably the right is the answer. The spreadsheet can go out into an extracted text, and that extracted text can look pretty gnarly. And it's quite surprising that these very large language models, these frontier models like GPT-4, can usually identify what's going on. It can put them into a failure state, which we've also observed, and then you can deal with things like hallucinations in that situation. But overall, a lot better than I expected. What role, if any, do prompts play? Is that aimed at me?
Yeah. So yeah. I think so. Yeah. So it's Marianne. So what role, if any, do prompts play?
Yeah. Prompts play both more and less of a role than you think. So there's a lot of all these it depends answers. So what we did was we took
You're a
direct
lawyer
review
after all.
protocols. Yeah, no, I'm not. We took direct review protocols that have been written by human attorneys, and we started with dead matters. But even this last test was a live matter. It was with a review protocol that had been written by an attorney who knew nothing about generative AI. You know, GPT-4 wasn't even in their mind when they wrote these review protocols. And we took that text directly in, and that was the only context we gave the large language model about the case itself. Now, we gave it some additional instructions that we had written, right? So that was relativity prompt engineering. But the attorneys themselves, we were really curious to see if attorneys are prompt engineers secretly without even knowing that they're prompt engineers, because great attorneys, if you see a great review protocol, you know you're actually kind of encountering a great attorney. They're concise, they're very specific. It's like you go into like OpenAI's guidance on how to write a great prompt, and it's very similar to probably the guidance that an attorney, a senior attorney would give in how to write a great review protocol, right? You want to condense as much information as possible, and have people feel very equipped to make good decisions. And ambiguity in the review protocol leads to not great results from the model, and we've seen that too.
Okay. Can I ask you just to kind of rewind in your presentation? There was a point where you said, okay, that it may not, be such a huge issue that the precision was kind of lower, in the GPT results than in the human results. As long as you get, this very high level of recall. And I wasn't quite sure I understood the reason behind that.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons why the lower precision is, let's say, an opportunity and not necessarily a stumbling block. So first of all, you would be unlikely to be able to directly turn over results that had been created. If precision was done at 60%, you might need to get it a little bit higher before you could turn it over to the receiving party.
Okay, because the parties usually agree on like a level of
I don't know.
like an F measure or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure that precision gets negotiated. Recall definitely does, but you don't want to turn over non-responsive docs, and you can get in trouble for doing that sort of thing. What you can do though is you can say, if you have a model that has a high recall, and then it's the ratio of precision to richness of the matter that I call a cull factor. And I'll do a quick piece of math. So let's suppose my recall is 97%, like in this scenario, and my precision is 50%, but the richness of the matter is 10%. That means that I'm going to find twice as many documents, because my richness is 50%, as there are in the matter, but there were only 10% of the documents were relevant. So I can go down from the full universe of documents to 20% of the population. So that division of 50% by 10% gives me a factor of 5 reduction in review costs. I don't have to review 10,000 documents. I have to review 2,000. And yeah, I'll close because I see we're in the last 30 to 60 seconds. There's a really, really big difference between a model and a product. And so the purpose of this conversation was just to kind of help people get oriented on what the model does, and what its capabilities are, just from a raw perspective on real data with customers. To go all the way to a product, there are additional things you have to consider, like hallucinations and defensibility, and the interface and how it gets used and all of that. And so that's the fun part. I mean, the academic part is fun too, but there's a lot more work that goes into it after that, besides just figuring out how to use the large language model.
Thank you. And speaking about the academic part, last question from Aaron: will you be publishing these findings?
Yeah, we are submitting a manuscript right now. I hope to have a draft ready by next week, but I can't commit to it yet. It still has to go through a few more iterations on our side, but we should have something very, very soon. Send me an email and I will get it to you as soon as we're ready to release it.
Cool. Could you please put your email into the chat so folks can reach out? Okay, good. Well, thank you, Aaron. This was super interesting too. And all the presentations today I thought were exciting, and I'm really kind of pumped about kind of the new year and all the cool things we will learn in this in our group meetings from folks like you all. And thank you for joining. Please keep us posted, and we'll be reaching out about our next group meeting as soon as we have something to share. Right? It's probably next week or in the next 2 weeks or so. All right. Well, good to see you all, and see you again soon. Thank you all for joining.